Chapter 6 Treasures of the Sea and Past. Saint-Domingue, 1775. The ocean waves flowed playfully between his toes as Thomas Alexandre darted across the beach on the beautiful shores of Jérémie, his younger brother Adi hot on his heels. They chased each other across the hot Caribbean sand, heedless of the trouble they might stir. A lone vulture circled ominously over the sun-drenched beach, its dark wings slicing through the sky like a silent harbinger over the carefree scene below. "Thomas, stop teaching your brother such bad manners. He looks up to you," Nui chided, her voice sharp with reprimand. But her words fell on deaf ears. "Old frog," Thomas muttered under his breath. "I heard that," Nui croaked back. "And I'm going to tell your mother to give you a proper spanking for it." "I'm too old for spankings," Thomas Alexandre retorted defiantly. "I'm 13 years old." "That's 13 years of sense that needs to be knocked into you then, because you surely don't got any," she replied irritably. Just then, young Adi stumbled, falling face first into the sand. He landed hard on a sharp rock that left a nasty-looking gash on his leg. His breath shook as he began to whimper. "Mama!" the little boy cried helplessly. Marie Cosette turned to Nui. "Can you get Adolphe? I'm still dealing with Jeannette." Jeannette was the youngest child from the Pietri family, a bubbly but demanding 1-year-old. "I'm coming, Adi," Nui called. "Your mama's with the baby. I told you to stop." Her voice tapered off as she moved to console the sobbing 9-year-old. Thomas paused, staring out at the ocean as he wiggled his ebony toes deeper into the sand. He liked how squishy it felt. Suddenly, something red caught his eye in the water. He quickly rolled up his breeches and waded into the crystal-clear ocean. There was something half buried in the sand. It looked like fabric. He kicked the sand around it to discover it was not only red, but blue and white as well. It was a flag, a British one by the looks of it. Though faded and worn from its tenure underwater, the sight of it filled Thomas with excitement. He pulled the flag free, gently pushing aside a small crab that was clinging to its folds, and dragged it back to shore. Nearby, the Rouvray family was also enjoying the beach. Their son Phébus noticed Thomas' discovery. Soon, several children came running to marvel at the treasure Thomas had unearthed. "Is that a flag?" Phébus asked, eyeing Thomas with curiosity. He appeared to be about the same age as Adi, who was still crying over his wounded leg. "I think it washed up from a shipwreck," Thomas replied enthusiastically. "It looks like it's from England." "I want it," Phébus declared, reaching to snatch the flag from Thomas' hands. "It's not yours. I found it. You can't just take it," Thomas protested, holding the flag firm. "Yes, I can. Look at you. My father says your kind are an abomination. So if I want the flag, you have to give it to me," the boy said arrogantly. "I do not. I found it, fair and square." "Then I'll have to take it from you," Phébus threatened. "You'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands," Thomas retorted, straightening up to his full height, which was considerable for his age. Phébus hurled himself at Thomas, but Thomas easily stopped him, literally holding him back at arm's length as the child tried to run at him. "You dare lay a hand on me?" Phébus sneered. "You lunged at me," Thomas replied defensively. "My daddy says it's illegal for a black boy like you to touch a white man like me," Phébus shot back. "First off," Thomas retorted, "I'm definitely at least 5 years older than you." "This demands a duel," Phébus cried, grabbing a large stick from the beach. "Are you scared? My father is in the army." "So? My father was in the army too," Thomas replied, finding a similarly sized stick as he prepared to defend himself. The small crowd of children that had gathered around them buzzed with excitement as their argument escalated. The two boys clashed on the shoreline, their sticks whipping through the air as the onlookers cheered. "Thomas, stop! It isn't worth it!" Thomas turned to see his older sister Rose calling from the sidelines. Thomas, however, was firmly committed to showing this pompous child that he wasn't to be messed with, especially since Thomas was significantly older, taller, and stronger than Phébus. It really was no contest. Phébus swung his stick forcefully, but Thomas skillfully dodged the blows, focusing primarily on defense rather than striking back. He did know that he couldn't get away with going on the offense, but his restraint wasn't enough to satisfy his overprotective sister. "Did you hear what he said to me?" Thomas called to her as he parried another blow. "Mama's going to kill you. Just stop. You're going to get in so much trouble," Rose warned. "I'm defending myself," Thomas shot back. "Thomas Alexandre!" It was his mother's voice. He stopped where he stood and dropped the stick. He was definitely in trouble. Phébus, taking advantage of Thomas' hesitation, struck him sharply across the face with the stick, leaving a deep scratch above his eye. A trickle of blood ran down his cheek as several adults rushed over. "What is going on here?" a wealthy woman demanded. It was Madame de Rouvray, Phébus's mother. "Mother, he won't give me the flag," Phébus whined. "I want it, and he pushed me." Madame de Rouvray gasped in horror. "He did what?" Marie Cosette, who had just managed to arrive at the scene, little Jeannette wailing in her arms, said desperately, "What have you done, Thomas?" The little toddler was bouncing on her hip. "It wasn't my fault," Thomas insisted. "I found it. He can't just take it." "Your child assaulted my son," Madame de Rouvray shrieked, glaring at Marie Cosette. "I'm the one bleeding," Thomas retorted. "Quiet, Thomas," Marie Cosette spat. "I am so sorry, madame. I will speak to my son. This sort of behavior will never happen again." Her tone was calm and measured. "I don't know what Antoine sees in you," Madame de Rouvray sneered. "Your kind should be working in the fields, not walking on the beach with respectable society." "Again, madame," Marie Cosette said, her voice steady. "I will address this behavior with my son." "He should be whipped," the haughty woman shouted. "He is not a slave, madame," Marie Cosette shot back. "I will see that his father punishes him appropriately when we get home. I'll be sending the gendarmes. Wait until my husband hears about this. Come, Phébus," she yelled at her son, who turned to follow but stuck his tongue out at Thomas as they trotted away. Marie Cosette turned slowly to look at her eldest son. Her eyes were simmering with anger. "How could you be so reckless, Thomas Alexandre?" "It wasn't my fault, Mama," Thomas insisted as they began their walk home. "Do you think this island has ever cared about that? You know how things work here. If you keep this up, you're going to get yourself killed, or worse," she admonished. "What could possibly be worse than getting killed?" he retorted, with the irritating persistence of a teenager who always believed himself to be right. "Slavery," she said flatly. "Slavery is worse. So you need to stop this behavior at once. When we get home, you will need to read twice as much. The only way to stay ahead is to be 10 times smarter and more skilled than the Rouvrays or any other entitled idiot on this island." Thomas groaned audibly. "Oh, and you'll be washing the dishes with Nui tonight," she added. "But, Mama, I won't hear any more excuses," she replied firmly. "Come along, Adi, hurry up," she called to the injured 9-year-old, who was limping over dramatically. Reading had become something incredibly important to Marie Cosette, for it gave her both power and protection. From the day she had been rescued from the Maubiers, she had vowed never to be helpless again. As she reflected on how the whites maintained control, one truth became undeniable. Education was their greatest weapon. In Saint-Domingue, she had observed that those who looked like her, yet thrived, all shared one trait: literacy. Meanwhile, those trapped at the lowest rungs of the castas could not read. It was no coincidence. Reading became her deepest passion. She devoured books daily and made sure her children did the same. If they could read, they could never be deceived, never be powerless, the way she once was. What had started with just a few books had grown into a modest but substantial library. Her favorite books were those on medicine, particularly a French translation of Principia Medicinae and a well-worn copy of Lamotte's A General Treatise of Midwifery. Her children, however, were more captivated by histories, and Thomas Alexandre was beginning to appreciate the works of Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau. "Can we continue Candide today, Mother?" Thomas Alexandre asked. He was being overly polite in hopes that she would abstain from sharing the afternoon's adventures from their father, who was known to be swift in his punishment when his children stepped out of line. "I don't want to read Candide. It's boring," Adolphe interjected. "It's important, Adi. To learn to read is to light a fire. Every syllable that is spelled out is a spark," Marie Cesette said, trying to sound warm, but her voice held a hint of irritation. "You only think it's boring because you're too immature to understand it," Rose retorted as she entered the parlor with little Jeannette in her arms. The precious toddler was babbling incessantly, performing an intense, nonsensical monologue to her older sister. "I am not," Adolphe said defiantly. "Quiet," Marie Cesette commanded firmly. "Thomas, if you and Rose wish to read Candide, you may do so together. I'll read something else with the younger ones." "Why can't she read her own book?" Thomas asked, barely concealing his frustration toward his older sister, who he still hadn't forgiven for this morning. "Because I want you to discuss the book as you read," Marie Cesette replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Understanding comes through stimulating intellectual conversation." Thomas groaned, but he did as he was told. Meanwhile, Marie Cesette settled down with Adolphe as Jeannette tugged impatiently at her skirts. She opened up a simpler book for him, but reading with Adolphe was always a challenge. Unlike his elder siblings, who were voracious readers, despite their present resistance, Adolphe could not bring himself to see the value of reading. No matter how often she emphasized the importance of literacy, he remained uninterested, preferring to chase frogs and catch fish in the creek. Sitting still, even for a moment, was a struggle for him, and the battle over reading often left Marie Cesette feeling exasperated. "You're rushing, Adolphe. Read it again," she instructed. "I already read it," Adolphe snapped, throwing his arms up in frustration and circling his mother's chair. "No, you weren't looking at the words. You just said what you thought they would say." "I didn't," he protested. "Please, just read it again." "I've already read it 5 million times," he moaned. "We need to work on your concept of numbers." "I don't want to read," Adolphe complained, getting up and walking to the window, longingly staring at a lizard that was clinging to the glass outside. "This is not a democracy. When I tell you it is time to read, you come over and read," Marie Cesette said firmly. Adi didn't answer. He was poking at the window, hoping the lizard would look at him. "Adi, you are doing exactly what the whites want me to." "I know," Adolphe groaned, exasperated. "This isn't a joke, Adi," she insisted. "This world will always try to diminish your worth. You must read. You are the descendant of French nobility and Amazon warriors. It is a heritage you must honor. We're not real nobles, Mama. Dad is a farmer, and you're just a mom, he huffed and stormed out of the room to go find his lizard. She thought about following him, but honestly, she didn't have the energy. Jeanette was tugging at the book, eager to tear out the unsuspecting pages. Marie Suzette was so overstimulated that she simply couldn't deal with her sons anymore today. I don't know what more I can do with him. He just doesn't understand, Marie Suzette confided to Nui that evening. Though she had long since stepped away from most household duties, she still liked to join Nui in the kitchen. She was a good cook and enjoyed the art of the skillet. Plus, talking to Nui was therapeutic. That's because Adi has only ever known privilege, Nui replied flatly. He doesn't see how fragile this entire system truly is, Marie Suzette continued, her worry deepening. I'm not so sure, Nui retorted. Saint-Domingue is changing. More and more landowners look like you and the master. Don't be naive, Nui, Marie Suzette responded with resignation. You've lived too long to believe that. This is Saint-Domingue. It would take an actual revolution to bring any real change to this cursed island. Nui quietly stirred the pot. Are you sure you don't want me to slaughter a chicken for dinner tonight? Marie Suzette sighed. No, save the meat for Sunday. If Antoine can finally get a good price on the coffee, we may be able to buy some fish at the market for next week. But for tonight, just the stew, she replied, as she cut the cassava with mechanical precision. An hour or so later, the family was called to supper. Vegetable stew again, Antoine scoffed. There's fresh bread and Rose-churned butter, Marie Suzette said, hoping to focus on something positive. Antoine groaned. Wine, mon amour, she offered, in an attempt to soften his mood. Antoine nodded, but his stiff posture and tight jaw made it clear that it hadn't been a successful day. Sensing the tension thickening around the table, Marie Suzette steered the conversation toward safer ground, encouraging Rose and Thomas to debate the merits of Voltaire. As their voices rose in lively argument, she kept a watchful eye on her husband, studying his face from across the table. After dinner, the children cleared the room and Marie Suzette found herself alone with her husband, save for Manon, who was cleaning the plates. Any luck selling the crop? She asked cautiously. Antoine let out a sharp exhale. No, that bastard Rouvray would only pay half of its worth. Marie Suzette hesitated before speaking. I ran into his wife today. But Antoine had no interest in household chatter. I refuse to be swindled by someone of a lower bloodline. Has he no respect for nobility? She met his gaze. But at what point do we sell for less, rather than let the crop gather dust in our stores while we struggle to pay our debts? His expression darkened. You think I haven't thought of that? He snapped bitterly. Marie Suzette held her ground, her voice steady but gentle. Mon amour, this was not a good harvest. We are running ourselves ragged. We cannot keep holding out for more when we already have so much less. We haven't that luxury. And why do you think our harvest was so poor? He asked pointedly. Antoine, she began, but he had no intention to hear her reply. No, our harvest fared worse than our neighbors because you refused to let me discipline the slaves, Antoine said angrily. We cannot torture people on our land. It isn't right, and deep down you know it, she implored. What isn't right is us struggling to put food on the table because we can't keep our laborers in line, he thundered. They don't fear me at all. They know the moment I raise my voice, Her Holiness Marie Suzette will come rushing to their defense. Because they shouldn't need protection from us, mon amour. You know what I went through. We cannot become those people. But those people are the ones who profit, he argued, his voice sour and bitter. They are the ones who can provide for their families. It is as if you care more about the slaves than about your own family. That isn't fair, she pleaded back. Your compassion towards them is impacting our profits, and it is causing your own children to suffer. She sighed deeply. I know, my love, but we will get through this as we always have. Her words were steady, but she knew his temper could turn dangerous if she didn't soothe it quickly. Moving closer, she softened her voice and gently rubbed his back. My love, this stress will consume you. How can we think clearly when you are so burdened? Perhaps there is something I can do to ease your load? As she spoke, she moved her face closer, her voice a whisper as she brushed her lips lightly against his ear. Antoine swallowed hard, the sound echoing in the quiet room. She knew he could see through her tactics. They'd been married long enough for that. But she was a master of diversion when needed. It is likely why their family had grown by 3 since their wedding all those years ago. Each child seemed to arrive about 9 months after a particularly tumultuous argument. Theirs was not a perfect marriage. They both knew this. They had never again managed to find the love and passion they had felt for each other under that magnolia tree. Charles had broken that. And there were parts of the soul that simply could not be healed for either of them. But they had managed well enough. Marie Suzette could see the struggle raging within her husband, a battle between logic and desire. His mind was trying to resist, but she could tell that his body had surrendered to her allure. Her touch had ignited something animalistic within Antoine, and he was no longer governed by reason, but by the pull of his more carnal instincts. She took his hand seductively and led him to the bedroom. She pushed him playfully onto the bed and walked back to lock the door. She leaned against the wall, her eyes fixed with his. A mischievous smile crossed her soft lips, beckoning him to paradise. He began to unbuckle his shoes clumsily, heeding her siren call. Before long, they were both on the bed facing each other. Marie Suzette wrapped her arms around his neck, her warmth pressing against his body. Her hands trailed slowly down, brushing over his chest, igniting every hair to stand on end beneath his frock. Her delicate hands continued their southerly journey until they reached the laces of his trousers. Just as the moment was about to reach its peak, a small, shrill voice pierced the air from the other side of the closed door. Mama! The thin cry shattered the romance as Jeanette pushed her tiny fingers under the crack at the bottom of the door like the legs of a stubbly little spider. Marie Suzette groaned. The timing was exceedingly unfortunate. She sighed and rose from the bed to scoop up her sobbing toddler. Ma petite fleur, it's bedtime, she crooned melodically. The magic was lost. Antoine's mind snapped right back to the realities Marie Suzette had so skillfully tried to distract him from. Antoine grabbed a faded velvet pillow and let out a muffled yell into it. Give me a minute. I'll put her back to sleep, Marie Suzette pleaded. Don't bother. I'm going to bed, Antoine snapped, turning away as Marie Suzette cradled their whimpering child. When she finally got Jeanette back to sleep, Antoine refused to reawaken. So Marie-Sosette pulled the covers over herself and buried her worries in slumber. Morning arrived, as it always did, the plantation stirring to life with its familiar rhythms. At first glance, it seemed like any other day. But destiny had other plans. For on this fateful Tuesday morning, there was an unusual knock at the door. They had not been expecting company. Standing on the threshold was a scrawny white man, draped in an oversized coat and clutching a worn leather bag. "Good morning, Monsieur David de la Pailletterie. May I come in?" Antoine stiffened. He had been using his fake name for so long, being called by his real one raised suspicions for the aging nobleman in hiding. Marie-Sosette, ever poised, stepped forward smoothly. "Of course. Please, come in. May I offer you something to drink?" "I'd certainly hope so," the scrawny man replied in a condescending tone. Antoine shot her a sharp look of silent warning. As the man settled into the parlor, he set himself directly at the table and unfastened his bag, pulling out a set of documents. He looked disconcertingly comfortable in their home, for a man they had never met before. "You've been a difficult man to find," he said cheerily. "I've been searching for you across the colony for quite some time. The name change made it particularly challenging, but here we are at last." Antoine eyed him warily. "I'm sorry, sir, but I didn't catch your name." "Apologies, my lord," the man replied, the formality of the title taking both Antoine and Marie-Sosette by surprise. "My name is Jacques Rambaud. I am the attorney responsible for managing your family's properties here in Saint-Domingue. I've come to deliver the last will and testament of your brother, the Marquis Charles David de la Pailletterie." A heavy silence fell over the room. "The last will? He's dead?" Antoine gawked. "When? How?" Rambaud's face dropped. "You hadn't heard. I am so sorry. Had I known, I would have been more tactful. Please forgive me." No, it's fine. I'm just..." Antoine struggled to find his words. A whirlwind of emotions surged within him. Grief, regret, numbness, and a sense of intense vindication all collided in his mind. The lawyer waited patiently as Antoine worked through his whirlwind of emotions. Finally, Antoine spoke, his voice strained. "It's been years since I last spoke with my brother. The last I heard, he had returned to France to claim our father's fortune." "Yes," the lawyer confirmed. "That was some time ago. Your brother had been living in France as the Marquis on the family estate in Belvianco, but he passed away 2 years ago, quite suddenly." 2 years ago? He's been dead for 2 years and I'm only now hearing about it? "As I mentioned," the lawyer noted, "you were a difficult man to find." Antoine was speechless. "I don't understand." "He was in France." "Well, it's rather complicated," the lawyer began. "After your father passed, Charles returned to France to claim the family lands and title. However, in his absence, his wife took charge of the plantation and made a spectacular failure in his absence. The estate in Saint-Domingue accumulated significant debt, and to remedy this, Charles attempted to establish a trading company of his own. He set up a landing stage at Monte Cristo in Santo Domingo and commissioned a ship, the... He glanced at his notes. "The Douce Marianne," named after his daughter, Antoine murmured. "So it seems," the lawyer continued. "The ship made 2 rather disappointing crossings, and it appears that the Marquis soon abandoned the shipping industry shortly thereafter." "What killed him?" Antoine finally asked. Rambaud hesitated before answering. "Gout? Or some sort of attack related to it. The voyage back to Saint-Domingue was hard on him. On top of the failed business ventures, his body just gave out. I'm very sorry." So he died in Le Cap? Antoine asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. Yes. Now, I understand that Charles was your younger brother, which makes the matter of inheritance a bit convoluted, the lawyer continued. Yes, I was disinherited by my family years ago. It's a long story, Antoine admitted. That's precisely why I'm here today. I have good news. You are no longer disinherited, the lawyer declared, his tone brightening. Did Louis reinstate me in the line of succession? Antoine asked in surprise. Your other brother? Not technically, no, the lawyer confessed. Then wouldn't Louis be next in line? Antoine asked. He was. But in the event of his passing, you were listed as Louis's next of kin, so when Louis died... What? Louis is dead too? Antoine gasped. I'm sorry for your loss, Rambaud said, his voice unemotional. He clearly lacked the patience for the time Antoine needed to process this wealth of news. My whole family. Antoine sank into a chaise by the window. Marie Cosette approached and gently took his hand, but he brusquely withdrew from her touch. What happened to Louis? He was so young. Antoine's voice quivered. Rambaud sighed sympathetically. I understand. This is a lot to take in. Louis, your youngest brother, was arrested shortly after Charles's death for selling defective weapons to the French military. He spent 15 days in prison. Tragically, a few days later, he was found dead. Found dead? What does that mean? Was he murdered? Antoine demanded. Not officially, Rambaud replied. Not officially, Antoine snapped back. I don't have an answer for that. You will need to consult the authorities for more information. However, that isn't what is important right now, Rambaud added. How can this not be important? Antoine snarled, rising from his seat and moving quickly to stand within inches of the lawyer's face. Because your inheritance has been restored to you, Rambaud declared, clearly attempting to redirect Antoine's focus. Excuse me? Antoine halted, stunned. Antoine David de la Pailletterie, the title of Marquis and your family lands have passed to you. Antoine was speechless. Marie Cosette saw him wavering and quickly moved a chair underneath him. He sat heavily, the room filling with silence. Marie Cosette felt herself holding her breath. The thought of making a sound, even to exhale, seemed risky in a silence this deep. Finally, Antoine spoke. I must go to France. How? Marie Cosette interjected hastily. We can't simply uproot our family and move to France. Undeterred, Antoine ignored her and turned to the lawyer. What about my brother's lands in Saint-Domingue? La Guinaudet? Those are likely to be yours as well, but the legal situation is more complicated. While you inherited the family fortune through your brother Louis, Charles's widow, Marie-Anne Touffe, currently holds the Saint-Domingue plantation. She firmly asserts that the lands belong to her, not to you. You will need to fight her in court before you can claim that property. Do I have any rights to his harvests or his shipping company? Antoine asked. Probably in the future, but Marie-Anne will not release them easily, the lawyer replied. Antoine and Rambaud talked for another hour or so, outlining the legal details. Meanwhile, Marie Cosette listened intently, her mind racing. Once Rambaud departed, Antoine wasted no time. He rushed to the bedroom and began rummaging through drawers. Marie Cosette looked on in horror as he rifled through her armoire. What are you doing? She asked. How much could we get for this? You cannot sell that, Marie Cosette insisted. That lace belongs to me. Antoine's brow furrowed in frustration. I need to find some way to make money. I can't use the profits from La Guinaudet yet, but we need to get to Paris immediately. Do you even understand how important this is? Of course I do. But you're asking us to just abandon our home, to leave everything behind without a moment of planning or consideration. There is a fortune awaiting us there, Marie Cosette. Who cares about this island anymore? Your family does, Antoine. This is our home. This island may not be perfect, but at least here, people who look like me, like your children, can make something of their lives. But France is so white. How will they see us there, honestly? Marie Cosette pressed. She had moved close to him. I really don't care what you think about this. You don't understand. You're just a what? Marie Cosette interrupted angrily. This wasn't just about France or inheritance. A decade of unspoken grievances were hanging on a thread in the flickering candlelight, just waiting for one of them to be honest with each other. Don't make this about something it doesn't need to be, Antoine threatened as he paced the room, his hands clenched at his side. I am the master of this house, and I say that I must secure the funds to return to France. I refuse to let this inheritance slip through my fingers again. I need this money. I deserve it. It's mine. You said I this time, not we, Marie Cosette said cautiously. I am literally going through our wardrobes looking for things to sell. You think I can buy transport for 6 people across the ocean when we can't even afford to slaughter a chicken for dinner? Marie Cosette stared at her husband, arms crossed and jaw tight. And what of us, Antoine? She countered, her voice laced with bitterness. Will you just abandon your family here, alone and destitute, while you chase after your dreams of nobility? Antoine's nostrils flared, a fleeting hint of remorse flashing across his face before hardening once more. This isn't about abandoning you, Marie, he insisted, though his words rang hollow. It's about securing our future, ensuring our children have the opportunities they deserve. What our children deserve has to be more than stacked stones on soil and gold coins in their pockets, Marie Cosette retorted, her voice rising with every word. They deserve a father who values them and their mother, who sees their worth beyond the color of their skin. A bitter silence descended upon the room, broken only by the sound of their ragged breaths and the distant chirping of crickets outside. I cannot stay here, Marie, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the pounding of his heart. I must claim what is rightfully mine. Marie Cosette's gaze softened, her heart weighed down by her sorrow. She reached out to touch her husband's trembling hand. And what of our love? Our family? Antoine shirked away, his eyes fixed upon the distant horizon where his dreams lay waiting, tantalizingly out of reach. The chasm between them that they had long sought to deny had instantaneously widened into an impassable abyss. Marie Cosette felt the painful truth settle in her chest. She knew that their love was on the verge of becoming a casualty of his ambition, a sacrifice on the altar of his insatiable hunger for wealth and power. Marie Cosette took a deep breath and summoned the courage to voice the question that had haunted her for years. Antoine, she began, her voice trembling, did you ever truly love me? Or was I just a pawn in your game of revenge? The accusation hung in the air like a ghost. Antoine's expression deadened, his features twisting. You dare question my motives, he spat, his voice venomous. Marie Cosette couldn't contain her feelings anymore. You married me out of necessity and adventure. I am not sure it was ever about love. It was about asserting your dominance. You picked me because you knew that your skin would always give you power over me, and above all, our marriage gave you revenge against Charles. Antoine had lost all of his self-control. "Of course it was about revenge," he yelled. "Charles took everything from me." "Just from you?" she replied, recoiling at the callousness of his words. Although a part of her knew all along, it didn't make the heartbreak any easier. "And what of you, Louise?" Antoine continued, his tone bitter. "Did you ever truly love me, or were you merely using me as a shield against the harsh realities of your true existence?" His words pierced her heart like daggers. "You haven't called me by that name, that slave name, in a very long time." Marie Sossette's voice wavered. Her hands trembled at her sides as she struggled to find the words to defend herself. "I cared for you, Antoine," her voice barely above a whisper. "But how could I truly love a man who kept me shackled in chains?" "I never chained you," he retorted. "You didn't have to," she shot back. She felt the tears coming, but she knew better than to allow herself to look weak at this moment. Antoine's eyes darkened with anger. His fists clenched at his sides as he turned away. "I cannot stay here," he said furiously. "I need time to think." He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Marie Sosette stood alone in their empty bedroom, haunted by the echoes of their shattered vows. She sank to her knees, holding back her tears. Alone in the darkness, Marie Sosette's mind began spinning in the desperation of self-preservation. She couldn't trust Antoine to shield them anymore. And Saint-Domingue was like a succubus that would surely come for her children without her husband's protection. She needed to find a way to temper the sting. Antoine did not return that night, nor the next. Marie Sosette carried on, holding her head high through the daylight hours, but in the quiet of night, dread settled deep in her bones. Something was coming, something inevitable, something terrifying. And no matter how fiercely she braced herself, she knew there was nothing she could do to stop it.